tech shame, technological shame of Generation Z. Hi, I'm Monika Hutnik, and I help leaders learn how to lead their international and virtual teams. Together with my team at ETA Leadership and Culture, we make the change happen by means of training, coaching, or facilitation. This podcast, A Step Ahead, has been created for all who want to grow in such an international remote environment, who want to grow as leaders, as HR, as change agents, and simply as humans. I'm inviting you here for discoveries and insights. All recording and materials are available at www.astepahead.pro. Well, the world of work is changing, and what is changing, among others, is also the generations that we have in place. Now, slowly, but inevitably, I'm discovering that I'm starting to belong to the older generations in the workplace. But it also makes me very curious about what are the younger generations like? What makes them tick? How do they approach certain things? And today we will be talking about a specific aspect, maybe a little bit unexpected aspect of Generation Z or Generation Z, the youngest generation in our job market. So I'm having Marta Leszczyńska as my guest, and I'm going to ask many questions about Marta's experience with GenZers. Welcome to the podcast, Marta.
Hello, Monika. Lovely to be here. Thank you for asking me to join.
Thank you so much. So let's start from the beginning. I'm using the term the Gen Z, Generation Z, or sometimes we might be talking Generation Z. What is that? What does it mean?
Gen Z are the young people. It's currently the youngest generation that is starting their professional career. Those are people who were born in 1995 until the 2015. Of course, in some sources, you might find a bit different dates, but in general, we assume those are the time frames that people were born in. And those are people who just finished their studies or they are still in high school, for instance. And some of them are starting their careers. They are joining companies and they are currently the youngest. And in a few years, one of the biggest generations that are going to be on the job market.
So let us count a little bit. The oldest people from this generation, how old would they be now?
Oldest people will be currently around 28, while the youngest will be just in a school.
Okay, so this is the generation Z, actually the youngest generation at the workplace, indeed.
Yes.
And why are you talking about the Gen Z? I know already that you are really heavily and a lot in touch with Gen Zers, the representatives, the people who are younger than 28. What's your role? What's your context?
Currently, I work as a learning and development manager in Foundever, Poland, which is a BPO corporation working in the outsourcing part of a business. And how am I connected? Well, I would say that 75% of my team are Gen Z. And also, I think that most of our company are people who are from the Gen Z generations. Many of them are still students. We do have people who are even currently 19 or 20. They just started their studies and at the same time, they started their professional career in the customer support.
Wow, that's really amazing. So contrary to myself, I need to admit, you've got a lot of insight into how the Generation Z actually works, what makes the people tick and how they approach technology, because today we want to talk about this very interesting phenomenon of a tech shame, technological shame. So what might this be, this technological shame?
We might say that the tech shame is a fear of being not knowledgeable enough regarding technology. And this is absolutely new thing from the market when it comes to generations, because it did not touch so much the previous generations. It's definitely something that we see in younger, especially in Gen Z. mostly because we assume that they are fluent with technology. If we have a person who is working in a company for already 20, 30 years, that person might be around 60 years old, automatically we're assuming that this person will not be fluent with technology, which is of course still a bias, because my mother, when she's comfortable with different tools, she's quite fluent with them. But on the other hand, we assume that those young people, that those Gen Zers, they are sitting in front of the computer and they just know what to do because, well, they were born in a time when computers were, let's say, in each and every home.
That's very true. Sometimes we talk about ourselves that we are the digital immigrants. We somehow immigrated into the land of digitization and technology. And we talk about the young people that they are born with a tablet at hand. So it's really quite an assumption. I confirm that. And I'm thinking about a program which we recently developed for one of the clients where we talked about the intergenerational collaboration. Yes, managing across generations. And into this e-learning, what we put was a little kind of a case study, how to take advantage of all the various features brought into a team by people from various generations. So obviously the older members of the team would be bringing a lot of experience, but the bias, the expectation towards the youngest members of the team was that, well, they lack experience, but at least they are knowledgeable in the area of technology. So certainly this assumption is here.
Yes, it is. And this is a thing which can be extremely stressful for young people because sometimes they tend to write in their CVs that they are fluent with, for instance, Excel, whereas they know just a bit of it. They are not very familiar with macros. They are not familiar with a lot of different functionalities of an Excel, but they had it during, some classes in high school, for instance, and they assume they know it. But in fact, they do not know what are the real possibilities when it comes to Excel. Sometimes also they are ashamed that, for instance, they are not familiar with a very specific tool, which sometimes, and that's a thing that comes from older generations, sometimes we are reacting like, oh, you don't know how to connect the printer to your computer? And we're just extremely surprised that they are not able to connect the printer. Whereas if we look a few years back when we were in their age, well, we were also not able to connect to the printer, but we assume that they will know it, although they haven't got even the proper chance to learn it somewhere.
That's very true what you're saying. For example, this Excel example, I love it. It makes me think of my experience with fax. I don't know how to use fax. And there was a moment when I was younger and being employed in a company, and my colleagues, my more experienced colleagues, would have expected that I would know how to use fax. And even this printer, which I'm having here in my office, has a fax function. I don't know what to do about that. I think nobody uses fax anymore. I heard it's still used in some institutions in Germany, so that's maybe a gossip. So maybe that's the same kind of an assumption. Maybe the people from the younger generation assume that Excel is a little bit outdated. However, the fact is that it's very heavily used in business, in daily operations, and you basically have to know it. And it's not a smartphone app, which I believe that Generation Z people might be much more at ease with than ourselves.
Yes, definitely. The new generation is very fluent with all the phone applications, the tablet applications. So everything that is inside an app, their phone, their mobile devices, they are very familiar with it. And they are less familiar with applications that are on their computers. And currently, in many cases, Gen Zers, they do not have their own computers or share it with someone else and use it only, for instance, for their studies, to write thesis, to write some case studies, documentations. But whatever they would like to do, they are doing on their mobile phones. And applications for mobiles are way easier to use and less advanced than those applications which are on the computers. So that's a huge difference. I do use the Google spreadsheet on my mobile phone if I would like to add something immediately, but I prefer to use it on a computer because I know that there's more functions. For me, it's way easier to use. The cells are a bit bigger, so it's also more comfortable, but I prefer to use Excel because it has even way more different options that I'm using in my daily life. So whenever you're comparing your phone with some applications on a computer, those phone applications are way easier to use. That's why our new generations, they were, as you said at the beginning, we think that they are almost like born with tablets and smartphones in their hands. But this is normal. They do have a smartphone. They are using it. In many cases, as parents, we are buying some phones to our children so that they could be in touch with us. So we as parents feel safer. And during that time, they are just learning new things. They are learning new apps. They are reading how to use it. They are using YouTube. They are watching some tutorials on YouTube. But still, those are the things which are related to the mobile phone. And what we are missing in many cases is how to learn things that are available on computers.
Oh, that's very true. So summarizing this technological shame, that's about being ashamed to confirm, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do the Excel, the PowerPoint, or whatever it would be, because of the underlying assumption that the environment is expecting me to be fluent. So I imagine this might be even a kind of a double barrier. Not only are the young people newcomers into the business area, into the world of working, but also they are additionally like afraid or blocked to confirm that they don't know how to, deal with something and ask for help. Is this a phenomenon which you're observing in your company?
Yes, of course, not for each and every person, because we know that every person can be different. But in general, when I'm observing those young people who are just joining, for many of them, this is their first job. And I also work with foreigners. In my company, currently around 75% of employees are not from Poland. So we have a huge clash of not only the generational differences, but also the differences depending on the country and the culture that people are from. But when we look on GenZers, I would say that this is a generation which is quite similar. I mean, people are quite similar to each other. The globalization helped a lot. They are watching the same movies. They are checking the same YouTube channels. Everything is like more global. They have a better access to different courses, to knowledge, to whatever they are going to Google. Whereas the previous generations, I think they do different when it comes to individuals. But when I see people who are joining our company, I see that those are people who would like to present themselves from the best possible angle. They are trying their best. They are putting really a lot of effort. Many of them are still studying. So they are combining university together with a work. And when they are facing a challenge, when it's related to the technology, in many cases, they are afraid to admit or I'm studying mechanical engineering, and I do have an issue with logging into my computer.
That's something that I wouldn't be afraid of because, I'm old enough to be, relying on the assumption that people of this age don't know how to use technology. So it's a kind of a comfortable stereotype that I can easily use for my service, for my advantage when I want to. But it's contrary to the younger generation. It's quite amazing. And you said that some of them really want to present themselves very well. So how do the Gen Zers show the technological competence in their CVs?
They are marking that, for instance, they are fluent with a specific program. Their CVs are, I think in many cases, they can be more graphical ones. So they are using like dots or stars to show how fluent they are with the specific tool. But going back to what we said previously, when they do not know what are the real possibilities of the program, then they think that whatever they had during their studies or maybe in high school, it's the top what that program can do. So they are writing that, for instance, they are fluent with PowerPoint, with Word, with Excel. Sometimes, yes, they are writing that Excel, they are like intermediate, but still their skills are more on the basic level because, well, they never had a chance to use more than 10% of possibilities that are in those applications, on those programs. And that's why in many cases, they just rate their skills higher than it is in the regular life.
Well, this makes me wonder whether maybe that the technology that we are using is getting a bit outdated, if the younger generation is not into it. But on the other hand, I also am thinking about my own experience when I was just, a fresh graduate and looking for a job. And at that time, I was applying for an analytical job of, I think it was like a business pricing analyst. I think that was the name of the function. And one of the major questions or major tasks which I needed to prove in my job interview was the ability to actually use the Excel as software with a few more advanced functions than just typing into the cells and summing up the numbers. Yes. So I remember that maybe it's also like a feature of the market that we need to consider. And, I also was thinking about how can the people from the younger generations actually get prepared to be fully adequate in a modern company, yes, to be fully relevant in business. I even had a conversation about that with my colleague from Australia who admitted to be a Gen Zer. And I asked him, so how do you learn technology at schools in Australia? And he said, yes, we do get this kind of a general overview. But in fact, when it comes to working with PowerPoint, with Excel, with many of the functions on a professional level, I needed to learn that at work. So this seems not to be a local phenomenon in Central Europe, for example, but this seems to be a much broader phenomenon across the world, maybe even.
Yes, I would say so. In many cases, schools are not preparing young people to be able to work. Well, I can even look on what I had in my school. I was not able to do my tax summary, the first tax summary, because I haven't got that at my school any time. So I needed to Google, I needed to do the research, and that's what young generations are doing. Sometimes they are just finding those tiny things that they are missing, searching for their knowledge gaps, and they see what they are missing and they are trying to Google it. And in most of the cases, they are quite successful because, let's be honest, most probably at least one person in the world had the same issue that you are currently having. So what they are doing is that they are very open for browsing through the internet, searching for the solutions, less able to ask others, colleagues maybe. And I think this is what's related to this tech shame, that in many cases they prefer to Google something, to check for the answers by themselves before they will ask someone else. And I think it's partly connected with the fact that they, at one point, they would like to be independent. But on the other hand, they might be afraid that someone will look at them and say, like, you seriously don't know how to do it? But why? You should be so fluent with the technology. So I would say that might be an issue also.
And it might also be about the availability of information, I'm thinking. So when I was, entering the job market as a fresh person, I had not enough resources in the internet to be able to find anything quickly, not to mention the quality of internet, which used to be very slow at that time. Not really reliable, not really anything that you would be relying on as a source of information. Now what I'm noticing, I had this recent case that we had in our company. I am running a project on a Polish-German cooperation, and I was looking for a good title and hoping for a little brainstorm. I posted this question in our internal group chat asking, so what kind of ideas enter your mind when you think about the Polish-German cooperation, so that we can create a little bit of a funny headline for the training? And what I got was a ChatGPT answer proposed by, I think, the youngest person on our team. So I think there is a collaboration. Yes, you not only have to ask the Mr. Google, but you can also ask the ChatGPT as an even more personalized way of receiving information. And this actually might decrease the willingness to talk to colleagues. That's true. I can see a little disadvantage about that as well.
As you said, the disadvantage because the connection might not be so good with the colleagues, because when it comes to age, or more experienced, let's call it a more experienced colleague can share some ideas or give some solutions to young, new colleague, then it's also building new relationship, helping them to get to know each other. On the other hand, I also understand why young people prefer to check something or ask ChatGPT, mostly because, as we said, the tech shame. They are just ashamed that they do not know something. And in many cases, when we are working online, remotely, it's easier to check something online than to try to set up a meeting with someone, to interrupt them, to try to ping them on Teams, Slack, or whatever people are using. And also those Gen Zers, they know that, well, okay, I first need to deal with that issue by myself. And when I will be stuck, I will try to ask someone else.
And how do you address this tech shame in your company? What are some of the ways that you try to facilitate this learning process and opening up and really also solving issues?
First things first, personally, I don't assume that if someone is young, will be fluent with technology. I try to not assume anything. I also not assume that a person who is, let's say, 50 plus will not be happy with using new technologies, because we can be heavily surprised by people. And that's the first thing. And I think that should be a ground rule for all the leaders, to not assume anything. And the second thing is that while we are creating the training sessions, we are designing them in a way that we are covering also the basic things with logging into the systems, with showing how to do the basic troubleshootings, because this is an outcome of not assuming that they know it, because we are still learning, and everyone started in a place that they were, especially in my company, because most of our management started as agents, as customer support representatives. And we still remember how it was to start it as a very first job, when people are very stressed, and using those systems. And this is so complex. And on top of that, you have the knowledge that you need to acquire to fully support the customers. So in such way, your brain is just like filled with all of those information. And then you are sitting in front of a computer and something is not working. So we remember that time. And that's why we would like to approach our new hires without assuming that they don't have it. We just assume that if you do, okay, let's move further. We'll have more time to chit chat, for instance. If you don't, no worries. I remember when I was on your place, I had the same issue with you. And I think that's a thing that is bringing a huge difference for us and also for our employees. We just give them a time and possibility also to ask questions and not to be afraid to do it. And I think the advantage here is the fact that when it comes to trainers, most of my trainers are people who are late Gen Zers or young millennials, and they get along together. They understand each other and understand also the challenges that they are going through.
And I believe it might also be about the language that we use. In each company, it's a kind of using specific vocabulary, and using vocabulary in a foreign language, especially if we've got a very international team, in the business context might be different than what you got used to using when you were, for example, learning English as a language of communicating and, studying or whatever. And I remember this case with Windows that we discussed the other day. Would you share it? Would you share it, please?
Yes, of course. That was a case between two Polish speakers. So when I'm saying it in English, people are not that surprised surprised. But that was a training 101, trainer and one participant. And the trainer knew that there is an issue with one of the systems. So whenever the browser is opened with that system, the whole computer is just quite slow. So he suggested to the participant to please close the window because I think the system is quite slow and it's just slowing us down and we don't need it currently. And the participant answered, but I always have my windows closed because I'm living near the trams and it's so loud outside that I wouldn't be able to talk with you without windows closed. And he was so surprised hearing that. And at the beginning, he thought that she's just joking, like a chit chat, a joke, so funny. But no, she meant that seriously. So she might knew the wording, for instance, from computer. It's a tab. In your phone, you have some tabs, not exactly the windows. But when we are talking about the browser in a computer, we are saying, of course, all about the tabs. But still, we are also talking about new window. Please open a new window. Please close that window. And I assume it might be just confusing for some people. As you said, we are using English to learn different things. But when it comes to people who are from different cultures, in many cases, English is not their native language, which means that we need to learn again the meanings of some words.
That's very true. And also the easiest way to learn is actually to learn from colleagues. So the more someone is encouraged to talk to others, the more knowledge they can get, the more this kind of invisible know-how in the language as well. Marta, how would you conclude our conversation on Generation Z? In fact, we haven't really talked about Generation Z as a vast topic. There's a lot that we can discuss. We only talked about this very surprising phenomenon of tech shame, technological shame. What would be important as a hint for HR managers and the newcomers themselves?
I would say only one thing that can make our cooperation extremely successful, which is let them be themselves and don't judge. Whenever you will have a person that is admitting to you that has no idea how to do something, answer, okay, let me just show you how to do it. Or yes, sometimes as a manager, you might not have a time to do it. So you can say, okay, I will ask John to help you with it because I'm running for another meeting. Will that be okay with you? And it will be okay. So the most important thing is not to laugh, not to make them ashamed of the fact that they do not know something. So in general, just be open, try to avoid all the biases that you might have which are related to the age, and just listen to people. Just listen and answer. Do not say, oh, I'm surprised that you do not know that. Say, okay, let's think how we can help you with that issue. And the more you will be open, the more you will show that openness for different behaviors, the more they will trust you and will be more open for you. And in general, that's a thing that builds a long-term relationships. And in such case, those young people, because many people are saying, oh, Gen Z, whenever they will get few dollars or zlotys more, they will just leave your company, go there to another one. No. If they will feel comfortable with a company, if they will feel comfortable with their manager, they will stay there. Because for them, the atmosphere inside the team is more important than money they can get from another company.
Thank you so much, Marta. Remember when we were young and also entering the job market, learning everything. Let's be open to also colleagues who are at the same stage in their lives. Thank you so much for making it explicit to us.
Thank you very much for having me. And I hope that managers, HR, or companies, you will listen to more of our podcasts and implement that knowledge in your daily lives.
Thank you, Marta.
Thank you.
three main conclusions which I'm taking from this conversation with Marta are, first of all, don't assume that being a member of a certain generation automatically would mean anything. Secondly, well, if the Gen Zers are newcomers in your company, well, do welcome and embrace them just as you were a newcomer a few years back. Also, thirdly, check what you can learn from Gen Zers. I think there is always a space to learn from the newcomers in the field as well. If you like to see the summary or any links mentioned in this conversation, you will find them on the landing page of astepahead.pro/013. It's the 13th episode of my podcast. I would be so delighted if you share and if you recommend this episode or my podcast in general to any of your friends or to any of your colleagues. It really helps me get over this initial phase of reaching more people and winning my own audience, which is coming to life slowly but surely. Please do help me with this. I will be so grateful. If you like to listen to some other episodes that are similar or that might be helpful in addressing the Gen Z or the technological shame, I would first of all refer to the one on psychological safety. If you have it in your team, if you maintain it in your organization, you will surely know when people are not able to do something. That's an episode number 3, a conversation with Katarzyna Romanowicz. So astepahead.pro/003. And when you go 005, you will listen to a conversation with Johanna Fink on being a part-time manager. The future of work, absolutely, and I believe that this is something very relevant for Gen Zers, all the flexible forms of employment and working for an organization. Finally, if you are a Polish speaker and you would love to get a little bit deeper into this area, I have also recorded an episode with Marta about the tech shame of Generation Z in Polish, and you will find it on my Polish-speaking portal okrokdoprzodu.pl/066. So this was a little bit of a sample of a Polish language. If you are a Polish speaker, you will know where to find this episode. Thank you so much for being together today, and talk to you next time.